Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Indiana State Police Roadshow. I am Sergeant John Perrine, first-time host, long-time guest, but happy to be here, and thank you to our sponsor, the Indiana State Police Alliance, and Indiana State Police. The Alliance also has a subsidiary of Cops for Kids. They help put this show on every week. The man behind the cameras, the man that makes us look good every single week is Tom Trial. Thank you for all your efforts, Tom, putting this on YouTube each and every week. And again, thank you for tuning in from across the state. We're happy to have you listening. With me today is a 24-and-a-half-year veteran of the Indiana State Police, Sergeant Chris Lambert. Thanks for coming, Sergeant.
You're welcome.
All right, so this is kind of a neat opportunity for me as the first-time host for this show. Is Chris and I have been friends for a long time. We started working the road together back in Pendleton, so it's been neat to watch his career as he's gone through several things. But one thing that he stayed passionate about and stayed with his entire career is his passion for water safety and scuba diving. So, exactly. Chris, let's talk a little bit about, we're going to go through a lot of things today, but let's just kind of start with general, right off the bat. What happens if somebody crashes and their car goes into the water?
If your vehicle crashes into water or even drives into water, there's several things that you have to do. The first thing is you have to get that seatbelt off. It saved your life. Hopefully that all of the safety devices that manufacturers have put in those vehicles have worked, so you have to get the seatbelt off. The next thing you have to do is get the windows down. You have to organize the children or passengers, if there are any in the vehicle, and then you have to get out of the car. Those 4 steps: seatbelts, windows, children out.
Okay, so that kind of goes along with a myth that we all hear out, and it's the old story of my uncle, my cousin, my grandpa, something was involved in a crash, and the officers told him if he was wearing a seatbelt, he wouldn't have survived. Or people think, well, if my car goes into water, I don't want to have my seatbelt on, so I just don't wear it at all. Is first of all, the water submersion crashes are very low, but the first part of your plan has got to be to take that seatbelt off.
Exactly. There are quite a few myths that surround vehicle immersion crashes in water. Matter of fact, we dispelled some of those myths around 2009 when we introduced language that affected the first electronic version of the Indiana Driver's Manual. But yes, seatbelts, you have to wear the seatbelt to survive the crash. It may not be as simple as just driving into a body of water. You may be in contact with another vehicle, a guardrail, a rock in Indiana, a deer, which I've actually been a part of a response to a water rescue that involved a crash involving a deer. So wear the seatbelt. You have to have that seatbelt on.
Yeah, so again, first thing is wearing your seatbelt to survive the impact, because maybe it might not just be so simple as a smooth ride into the water. It could be a rollover. It could be a high-impact crash where you end up in the water. It might be deep water, or it might just be a ditch with 3 or 4 feet. The steps are still the same, right?
Yes, they are. That the seatbelt, and I honestly, in over 24 years of doing this, I personally have never seen a seatbelt that's been jammed. But if you can't take your seatbelt off, you're going to need to cut it. So you will need some kind of a cutting device. For the windows, what we tell people is once you have that seatbelt off, you're not going to get tossed around. That's another myth. You'll be tossed around. If that was the case, they'd put seatbelts in recreational boats. It just doesn't happen that way. When you get ready to roll the window down, you actually have to look out the window to see where the water level is. And over a dozen vehicles that I've been involved driving into the water, that water will stay below the windowsill about an inch or so for long enough time for you to make your egress. But always check that window. If the water's above the sill, move to a window that's in the back. Your electric windows more than likely will open unless you've taken such a substantial impact that it shorts out the battery. Mm-hmm. But roll that window down. If you can't roll it down, you'll have to have a window braking device, and I can get into that here in just a second. I'm going to show you a tool that we would recommend. But once your windows are down and you have that egress, again, keep in mind this has to happen within about a minute. But you organize your children. Most parents, and before we really started to researching this and getting in touch with the experts, I more than likely would have answered this the same way. I would have started with my youngest child. But we want you to start with the oldest or most able child and then move to the youngest. The older children can help you. They can take direction better, and they may be able to be talked into self-rescue. But organize those children, oldest to youngest, and then get out. NASCAR style. Go out through that window, put them on the roof. If they can hold onto the side of the car long enough for you to get out, then let them hold onto the side of the car and everybody swim for shore.
Yeah, so again, first seatbelt off, and then you find an egress. And I remember back when I was a kid and first started driving, and you hear these stories, and they talk about, well, let the car fill up with water, and then you can open the door. So again, that's all out the window, of course, kind of pun intended there. But we're talking windows. Don't think about opening doors. We're talking get out windows.
That is correct. If you open the door, it's the same thing if you put a door on the bottom of your boat. It's going to flood very quickly. We've demonstrated that on video. It's been demonstrated by Dr. Gordon Giesbrecht, University of Manitoba, who is one of the researchers that we've been in contact with since the inception of our program into this. And the fact that a car door was open was one of the elements of the car accident back in 2007 that started this whole ball rolling for us to put this program on. So yes, opening your door will cause a rapid flow of water inside the car, and the car is going to sink a lot faster.
One of the neat things, and we've had a couple of car into the water crashes here recently in the Indianapolis area, is the things that are said afterwards. And the key to this is having a plan. It's because if you have a plan, it's going to help keep you calm. If you know, hey, if my car goes into the water, these are the steps I need to take. And people are even saying that. A lady that was recently rescued said, I remember them telling me roll down my window and crawl out. And so again, just those simple plans in the back of your head are going to be the key to survival.
Exactly. This is what Dr. Giesbrecht calls the stop, drop, and roll for the 21st century. Stop, drop, and roll was learned by every little kid, probably about 5 years old. I ask that routinely. Everybody remembers what that's for. But I will tell you, the incidence of having your clothes catch on fire and using stop, drop, and roll is way more rare than a vehicle immersion crash. In the United States, or actually North America, there's 10,000 vehicle immersion crashes of one type or another every year. 10,000 a year. On average, 300 Americans die by drowning inside their car every year. The highest, or one of the highest single vehicle mortality rates of any crash, including rollovers. So you have to have a plan. It's very simple. Seatbelts, windows, children, out. Our website has the Good Morning America video. It was very well produced. It gives those steps without providing any other information that would cloud that process. So they can go to our website and they can review that video. But also they need to have other things in their vehicle to prepare for that. Something as simple as a rescue tool. So we can talk about that if you'd like.
Sergeant Lambert referenced the website. That would be www.in.gov/ISP. Again, www.in.gov/ISP. And that will take you to some of the resources that have been put out there to learn this, that you can share with your family and your friends and your kids and spouse, and so that they can start to formulate this own plan, the what ifs. And it's always these scenarios of what ifs. And I know that Sergeant Lambert has spent a great deal of time researching this idea of cars into water and kind of dispelling some of the myths that are out there. And so to simplify it, it's seatbelts and children, or seatbelts, windows, children out.
Exactly.
Once they get out, then what? You find you get out of the window. Do you try to swim to shore, or what's the plan?
If you can swim, try to swim to shore. The direction that your vehicle came from is probably going to be the closest shore. If you cannot swim or the water's extremely cold, stand on your roof, just like the people in Indianapolis did. Most retention ponds in Indiana are 8 to 10 feet deep. They have several feet of silt on top of that, which makes them even shallower. Just stand on top of the car. Keep your airway open. Maintain the integrity of that airway. Keep your children above water. Help will eventually get there. But you're going to have a lot better results if you're standing on the roof of your car as opposed to being inside it when the help shows up.
Yeah, so you've tuned into the Indiana State Police Roadshow. I'm your host, Sergeant John Perrine, Public Information Officer for the Indianapolis District. The Roadshow is brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance and Cops for Kids. Our guest today is Sergeant Chris Lambert, and he's a career-long diver, scuba diver, and water safety expert. And he's talking to us about what to do if your car goes into water in a crash. And so does anything change, Sergeant, if that water involves ice? If your car goes out onto ice and then breaks through, does any of the plan change?
We have demonstrated that before also. We want you to follow the same procedure. Seatbelts, windows, children out. If your vehicle does collapse through the ice, it's still going to sink in the same manner. So you still have that minute, typically, to effect a self-rescue. You might have to actually dive out onto the ice. What we say is do a PD, like you're sliding into second base. Spread your body weight out over that ice because it's going to be brittle anyway from where the vehicle caused damage to it. And then crawl out or roll out off the shelf or the ice shelf onto shore. So it really doesn't change the technique to get out of the car, but maybe how you effect a self-rescue to the shore.
You know, one thing, I watched you guys demonstrate this one time, and one thing that surprised me more than I ever would have believed is how long the car floated. It seemed like it floated for several minutes, and enough time to do all these steps you're talking about.
Right. Most modern cars will. Even the vehicles that we use typically have a lot of damage to the firewall, a lot of damage to the passenger compartment, so they'll sink a little bit faster, I guess, than a normal car would. But since that's such a variable, we say there is 1 minute to survival. You have to affect all of these things, seatbelts, windows, children out, within that first minute to give yourself the best opportunity to save your life. So, and one of those, like I said, is the tool that we recommend, and all the troopers have too, which helps facilitate that egress.
Yeah, and you know, naturally, something you said earlier about the order of children, and you're not picking, of course, your favorite child. Your order of children is the most capable first, and that almost goes opposite to what the natural feeling would be. Is if I've got a child strapped in a 5-point harness in a car seat. It seems mentally that's going to be the hardest one to undo. So, I have to be familiar with that car seat, and I have to be familiar with how to unbuckle those straps. But right. It seems like that's going to be the one I want to go first. But you're saying no, and it does make sense. Makes perfect sense. Is that if I've got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 2-month-old, the 10-year-old and 8-year-old can kind of take direction and then maybe help me.
Exactly. If you have an age range like what you're describing, just imagine this: any parent. Now you have an infant that you've taken out of a car seat. They're in one arm. You have that toddler that is terrified under the other. Your 10-year-old's having trouble with something in the car. You're not going to get out of the car, swim to shore, save these two, and then come back to get that 10-year-old. You're probably all going to perish with inside that car. And you hit on something when you were talking about the 5-point harness for child restraints. Most people know, because it's typically it's manufacturer. It's universal. Is that center nice international orange button to release that harness? The chest straps. That's where we see a lot of people, even troopers that are divers in these reenactments, have trouble with that chest strap. Always know how to undo that chest strap.
Yeah. So, you know, the car, everything we've talked about is if your car is upright. But talk about what happens if your car rolled over. You still have an air pocket, but you're upside down. Right.
If you're upside down and that passenger compartment has maintained its integrity, windows up, no water intrusion. Dr. Giesbrecht, and I didn't believe it until I saw the vehicle or the video. If that passenger compartment has its integrity, within about 20 to 30 seconds, the vehicle will actually invert itself because of the weight of the engine is in the front of the car. The front of the car goes nose down, and I'm sure that there's some simple physics involved there. But a vehicle that is upside down, maintaining integrity in that passenger car, will right itself after about 20, 30 seconds. So as crazy as it sounds, you're going to have to stay there, because if you roll the windows down at that point, then you're in trouble.
So again, going against that natural thing to do is you're asking people if you're upside down to wait, still unbuckle the seatbelt, still prepared an exit.
As far as I understand it, keep your seatbelt on so that you don't get tossed around inside the car. But keep that seatbelt on until the vehicle rights itself, and then start proceeding through the steps. Seatbelt off, windows, children, and out. Again,
there's no perfect plan, but the better prepared you can be for this. And we can't predict every single scenario based on, like you said, the damage of the car and the different voids and things. But just break it down real simply for everybody, the 4 steps if you find your car in water as a result of a crash.
Seatbelts, windows, children, out.
So that's that simple. Again, thank you. You've been listening to the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by Indiana State Police Alliance and Indiana, the Cops for Kids subsidiary of that. Sergeant Chris Lambert, our guest, has been speaking with us about the dangers of car into water, but how simply you can save yourself and save your family if you do find your car into the water. Regardless of your experience or your ability to swim, you can save yourself and maybe staying on top of the car until rescuers get there. Again, Indiana State Police Roadshow. I'm your host, Sergeant John Perrine. Roadshow out.